And now we're going to look at the ishara of the last verses of Surah al Muzammil before we start with the Surah al Mudathir for tonight. The last verses of Surah al Muzammil, the ishara again is the sort of like the spiritual reflections, also known as like the esoteric commentary. And we always say these are really beautiful for us to take separately from the tafsir, because sometimes the verses are describing things that are dealing with people who are disbelievers or opposing the Prophet or enemies of the Prophet Muhammad. The verses might be dealing with them directly, and the tafsir will deal with them directly, but then the ishara or the spiritual reflections always deal with Muslims, always deal with the believers, and how they can take lessons from verses that are not even talking about Muslims, but how do we as believers benefit from the values that are being taught and the messages that are being taught. So this is one of the reasons I really love the ishara. And the other thing is that there's so much repetition in Imam Ibn Ajiba's spiritual commentary. Whereas the surahs will have very, very different themes and things, the spiritual commentary is always like, man, I got work to do. The spiritual commentary, and that repetition is very, very helpful for trying to apply the verses for ourselves. So in the 19th, so this is going to be the ishara for verses 11 through 20. And Imam al-Qushayri, he says, for the verse where we're talking about وَذَرْنِي وَالْمُكَذِّبِينَ أُولِي النِّعْمَةِ وَمَهِّلْهُمْ قَلِيلًا, leave to me the deniers living in luxury and be gentle with them for a while. So then he reflects again, and here Imam Ibn Ajib is quoting Imam al-Qushayri, and he says that Imam al-Qushayri mentions, leave me with those who deny my oneness by the multiplicity of that which is in existence. So it's not the person who's disbelieving in God, it's the one who believes in God. Here he's talking about Muslims, but they see multiplicity. And so like Allah is one concern of many concerns, right? So in that sense, that's a form of denial, and so he says, leave me with those who deny my oneness by the multiplicity of that which is in existence. Ul Na'ma, he says, they are those who seek comfort to the extent that it busies them from at-tabattul. And again, at-tabattul is devotion, until the moments that their souls and hearts parted, or they ascribed with God partners. And here, again, this is not the person who disbelieved in God. This is the person who, they have, yes. Yeah, so that's what's being described as in this particular verse, but in the previous one, where the multiplicity is just the fact that there is multiplicity in existence is enough for someone to deny the oneness of God, not necessarily again as their Lord, but as their goal, right? So they have many they have many goals, and many of them are very independent of God, just like it could be something like think about the American dream, right? And so like God becomes, or the 5 daily prayers becomes just almost like Sunday, going to church on Sunday. I'm going to live my entire life kind of void of religion and void of any relationship with God, but I'm going to get this in just because I'm supposed to get it in, right? So then God becomes one of many instead of him being the sole purpose. But in terms of Ul Na'ma, that's what you just mentioned, is how it goes from there to now they can get to a point where they're ascribing partners with God. Now that's not like the shirk al-akbar, but it's the smaller one, the riya, or just having other motives, right? That are like the scholars, when they talk about intentions, they say that if your intention is like 50% for something in creation and 50% for God, then even that is rejected. You have to have at least 51% for God and 49% for creation. So, but here also it says that it's until the moments that their souls and hearts parted, meaning that they became so attached to the comforts of this world that the qalb, right, the spiritual heart, is something that we want it to be led by the ruh, and the ruh is the our not the self, not the ego, the ruh, like the soul, or sometimes translated as the spirit. That soul or that spirit always wants to be devoted to God, always is pulling us towards constant devotion to God. If the heart, that's in the spiritual heart, that's in the human being, is receptive to that, it will be pulled, right? If the spiritual heart is contaminated and filled with so many other things, right, then it's like the soul has parted with the heart. They're in two different places. The heart is stuck in this world, the soul is in a different place. And so he says this is when the heart is just obsessed with seeking the comforts of this world, such that it busies them from tabattul, from devotion. This is what happens to the person. وَمَهِّلْهُمْ قَلِيلًا, the length of their lives. So the word qalila, he says, let me translate a little bit. Yeah, that's in verse 11. And be gentle with them for a while. And the word qalila, in the tafsir, it had different meanings, but in the context here, it's for the duration of the person's worldly life. And he says, because it's a little, no matter how long it is, if a lot of time passes, and for two reasons, not just because this worldly life compared to the next life is nothing, right? Because any number over infinity is zero, but also because there's such little benefit in that person's life that the entire lifetime, even if it was many years, is described as qalila because of the small amount of benefit they took. Inna ladayna inkalan wa jahima, truly with us are fetters and hellfire. And here he says the restraints or the chains, they are the attachments again of this world, and the obstacles that held people back from reaching the secrets of Tawheed. And he says the food, the ta'amun, وَطَعَامٌ ذَا غُصَّةٍ وَعَذَابٍ أَلِيمًا. He says the food, this is the things that they ingested that prevented the soul from drinking up of experiencing the divine. And again, because of the narrowness of their path due to the obstacles and to the attachments. He says the adab and alima is not hellfire, because we're talking about this world, but it's being distant from God, being far removed from him, being far removed from, it says, from the door of his divine presence and grandeur. On the day of judgment, when the earth of our humanness will shake by the remembrance of Allah, and the mountain of our aql, our intellect, will emanate with the lights of reality, it will become like scattered sand. And that's the way that we're reading, sort of like the application of the verse. On a day when the earth and the mountains shake, and the mountains will be like heaps of shifting sand. So that's physical reality in terms of the day of judgment. Spiritual reality is a description of not of the soul that is actually being purified or being sort of brought out from its negligence or ghafla, right? So the earth of our humanness, like ardul bashariya. Bashariya, that's the only word I could describe as like humanness. One thing they talk about, for example, is that the great scholars or the true heirs of the Prophet Muhammed, they have bashariya and they have khususiyya. They have like a humanness because they're human, but they also have a khususiyya. They also have like the special quality, for lack of a better translation. And And sometimes people who only focus on the outward can only see their bashariyah. They can only see what is human, what is physically human about them, and they don't even notice like what's really amazing in them. So they're kind of veiled by that person's human qualities from how special they really are. And then there's other people that because they're in touch with their own khususiyah, for lack of a better description, then they're able to witness it sometimes in others. And so they'll be able to identify and see these things, and it won't be veiled to them. I remember like we were in Mecca, and we were going to visit the grave of Sayyidah Khadija. And we were just walking in the street, and Sheikh Walid was with us. And this was an Umrah trip that Majlis did, and then Oasis did at the same time. And one of our shuyukh, Shaykh Muhammad, was with us. And we're just like walking in the street. And I think we were trying to figure out like, how do we get in? And then all of a sudden someone like from really far away just comes, like crosses all this traffic and like gets right in front of us. And just like, he's so happy. He's so just wanting to help us. And like wouldn't leave us. He was just like saying salam to everyone there. And what are you guys doing? What can I help you with? And he was really happy to meet Shaykh Muhammad. And I'm like, how did like Shaykh Muhammad, what was that? Yeah. Yeah. So this person's like out there in the street, but like made like a beeline for us. And I was just like, Shaykh Muhammad is like a very, kind but he's a very unassuming person. If he's in a gathering, you may not even notice him. He blends in with wherever he is and with his surroundings for most people. And but this person just came out and was like, he didn't want to leave us. It was almost like, you want to come with us, but it was so beautiful to me because he was so excited actually just to meet our teacher. It was me, and I'm like, how did you see that from all the way across the street that you came out? And but that's like, I don't know. I honestly don't know because I'm not, I don't have any special insights like that. But this, we all have bashariyah, right? We all have this human quality. And then the khususiyah is like the part of us that really just wants to be devoted to God. It's related to that aspect within the human soul. And so on the day when the earth of our humanness will shake by the remembrance of Allah, and the mountain of our aql, right? And the aql it's connected to the spiritual heart. It's like your intellect. It's what your mind can see because of the purity of your heart, what your mind can grasp, and also what your heart can grasp. They're connected. The mountain of your aql will emanate with the lights of reality, and it will become like scattered sand, meaning essentially like I don't want to call it delusion, but like the ability to see reality as it is, right? Will almost like I when I read this, I thought of the Matrix. When he's like looking around, all of a sudden you can see the numbers. Anywho, it's describing a particular experience. I'm describing words here to you. This is not something I've experienced, but it's beautiful to read about because Imam Ibn Ajiba, he's not describing folklore. He's describing things that have reality to them. And it's unfortunately something that in our time isn't discussed. We don't get to tap into this. So it's nice to do so with his tafsir. And yes.
You said that they became so attached to the language of this world such that and then I missed that part.
Such that it busied them from, and the word that's used in Arabic is at-tabattul, which is devotion to God, right? And that occurred to the extent that their souls and their hearts parted ways. Like their soul went a different direction and their heart went.
Busied them from God.
Yes, from God.
Okay. Such that their souls parted what?
Yeah, parted ways with their heart.
Oh.
Yeah. But the here it's soul, not because we're using English and Arabic. So here we're referring to ruh, which is different than nafs.
So the ruh, that's the heart?
The ruh and the heart parted ways. What was that?
How's that possible?
The ruh, every ruh without exception, its way is to call to God. That's in our fitrah. The heart, when it became so engrossed in the material world and the comforts of this world, it became, you can say, consumed with that. And so its way became deviated from the way of the ruh. May Allah protect us from that, all of us. And then verse 15, we have indeed sent you a messenger as a witness concerning you, just as we sent unto Pharaoh a messenger. He says, he sent to us a messenger, a witness over us, a caller to these truths and rare secrets. The Pharaoh of every time rejected the messenger of every time. And that is the inheritors of every time. So the inheritors of the Prophet Muhammed of every time. And then, and then he says, so we overtook them. Here the we is referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the wideness of palaces to the constrictedness of graves. So how can you have requisite taqwa of Allah if you reject the day that you will stand before Al-Wahid Al-Qahar? So, and I guess that's the commentary on the 16th verse and the 17th verse. But Pharaoh disobeyed the messenger. And every time, wherever there is an inheritor of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, there's going to be someone who rejects them. So the Prophet ﷺ, who was the Pharaoh of the Prophet's time? Abu Jahl, yeah. And then afterwards, anytime there is someone who has inherited from the Prophet, there's going to be an enemy. There's going to be someone who wants to pull them down and reject them. And that's just the way it is. And yet they will always be overtaken. So we seized him with a torrential seizing. That's for Pharaoh. Here he says, Ibn Ajiba, he says, so we overtook them from the wideness of palaces to the constrictedness of graves, meaning every enemy, of an inheritor of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ will eventually die, right? They will be overtaken. And it's interesting that he says the wideness of palaces, because they're usually people who have a lot in this world, right? And then when they go into the grave, they see what they've earned. And then the question, so how can you have requisite taqwa of Allah if you reject the day that you will stand before Al-Wahid Al-Qahar? So if you disbelieve, how will you guard against a day that would make the children gray-haired? A day when the infant's hair will become gray out of, he says, out of shyness before the king. He says the sky will be broken around them as a person will no longer have the choice to believe or act well, as it is the place of deeds. Sorry, as it is not the place of deeds. Rather, it is the place of revealing the miracles of deeds, and people will be blocked from what they desire at that time. And this is a clear warning. Whoever wants should today take a path that will connect them to God before they are blocked off from it by the gate of death. It's like a heavy warning. And then the 20th verse. The 20th verse I thought was also commentary on it. It was beautiful. I thought it was gentle in the sense that after all of that, then we go back to this theme, which is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was someone who was given strength in two directions, or from two ways. He says jihatain. One of them was that he was strong both outwardly and inwardly. And he says, Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions that the worshippers, the people who busy themselves with acts of worship, and the ascetics, the people who they deprive themselves of the material attachments as much as they can. The ascetics are people of fasting. They took from him, I thought he was going to say the inward, but he says they took from him, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the worshiping of the outward. The worshiping of the outward, because the outward strength, because of their exertion in fasting and their exertion in prayer, which is all bodily, acts of devotion. Obviously, the heart is connected to it, but there's a lot of outward involvement in that kind of worship. And then he says the arifun, or the knowers of God, they took from him the worship of the inward, which is reflection and contemplation and having presence with God and in witnessing him. He says that for the worshipers and the ascetics, they have a special tahajjud, right? And for the righteous people in general, the salihin, their tahajjud is ruku' and sujood, right? Is the actual acts of prayer. And he says that tahajjud of those who know God, or the knowers of God, the arifun, are hearts that are constantly witnessing God and resting with the king. And he says resting with al-Malik al-Wadud, the king, the most loving. That's I guess the translation. And their hearts are always calling out to him. Like, the worshiper calls out to God when they're praying, right? The fasting person may remember to call out to God when they're breaking their fast, but the arifun, their hearts are constantly calling out to God. And they're present before him, and they're in a place of like receiving. They're experiencing God because they are always, whatever they witness in the world, they feel like they're just receiving from God. And then he says that the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were from this category. There was companions of the Prophet who were from the arifun. And he said from them, there were also those who would stand in prayer and those who would spend the night in, there were different categories. There were those who would spend the night in prayer. And then there was those who also would spend the night in like spiritual contemplation, I guess is a better translation. But it felt like he was saying, it's not just the outward prayer, it's that their hearts were in constant prayer. And then he said, what was that?
For the contemplation, what's the word that's used?
تفكر, not تفكر, الفكر والنظر. And so, and he said, Abu Bakr Siddiq was from them, was from this higher category. Or I don't want to, yeah, for now I'll use that translation. And then he says that Allah is the one who decrees the night and the day. And Imam al-Qushayri comments and he says, Allah is the one who determines the suluk, which is like the spiritual wayfaring from the night of what is habitual, from the night of what is within our normal regular habits to the day of the spiritual reality, meaning like taking us from our normal habits and ways of doing things to higher realities. It's Allah who determines that, not the person who's doing the wayfaring. And he spends a while on this. I didn't translate everything, but he spends a while saying it's not the person earning it. The person is doing the actions, right? But it is Allah is the one who yuqaddir. He's the one who decrees on that person that they will go from here to here. And he says it's according to the decree of God, not the decree of the salik, or the determination or the choice or even the exertion of the wayfarer. When a person realizes that it is God who opens every spiritual door, not their worship, not their deeds, not whatever they're putting forth, or one of the things that it does help is if you're not doing something for a reward, and if you're only doing something, once you realize it's God who opens all these gates in the first place, then you can stop doing something for just reward, right? It's not transactional. Now it's really going to be, well, because it's God who's going to choose if certain doors are opened or not open. So then it really just becomes about God, right? The worship becomes about, because he's worthy of this, right? And so whether he does or doesn't open doesn't matter. The person is just going to do that. And it helps them to be able to worship out of gratitude. Just, I'm grateful to be a servant who knows you and who gets to do this. And, you can understand the Prophet Muhammad when he would be praying and Aisha is asking him, like, his feet was swelling. You're a prophet, you're already saved. Why are you doing this? He said, "Afala akuna abdan shakura." Shall I not be a grateful servant? It's not about the next reward or the next prize, right? It's just, God is worthy of this. And just to be grateful that, like, if I can do it, there's so many people who are veiled from belief, are veiled from knowing God or having a relationship with him or loving him, or all of these things are huge blessings. Like when he describes the adhab of distance, right? Like to feel cut off from God or to feel really far from God is its own pain, is its own just, suffering. And to feel that you can pray is such a blessing, that if you wanted to, you can get up and pray. You know how to pray him the way he wants, pray to him the way that he wants you to pray to him, is such a huge blessing. So then he says, فَقْرَؤُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. I thought this was also, this was interesting. He says, don't start your path drowning in long, like lengthy recitation of the Qur'an, so long as the heart is still covered in its attachments, it's in rust, and it's filled with its attachments, both to its desires and its weakness to the ego, because it actually can't taste the sweetness and contemplate the true meanings because there's a block in it, right? So it makes it actually hard to read, right? It makes it hard to read for long periods of time because of those blocks. He says, rather, the spiritual guides and teachers, they often first advise students to discipline their souls, to spend the first part of their spiritual wayfaring actually working on the purification of their souls, right? This idea of takhliyah, like remove the things that are not good, remove those bad habits, remove those attachments, remove the things that are keeping you far from God. And also to be busy in dhikr, right? In Qur'an is a form of dhikr, but it's, this is like regular, awrad or regular litanies are easy on that person until the heart is receptive, right? Until the heart has been polished inwardly and outwardly. And now it's receptive to the Qur'an and its secrets and its lights. And so when the person then reads, the heart gets a lot and it will stay and it's not going anywhere. And the Prophet Muhammad, there's a narration where he said, if your hearts were really pure, then it would never tire of the remembrance of God, right? If it was really, there'd be no like, oh, I'm too tired to do this, or like that was enough, right? It's like a muscle, right? So if you're exercising a muscle that hasn't been exercised in a while, after a short exercise, you're tired. You're like, that's it for today, But as a person, does more and more, and the routine gets better, and it's gradual, and they keep at it, then that same person might be able to run a marathon and not really be too tired afterwards, So, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's not and so they say they busy the aspirant with it. Even the word is similar, riyada, right? It's like exercise, but it's a spiritual exercise. And then Allah knows that there are some, he says, alima anna sayakunu minkum marada, right? So Allah knows that from you, there are those who are going to be sick. And he says that the sickness of the heart, right, is the veil of selfishness. And it will busy the person's heart with the love of this world. And again, so the realities and the secrets of the Qur'an cannot appear in the heart. They will read the Qur'an, they'll still benefit, but it's not, they shouldn't like, be just nonstop reciting while their heart is still in that state, because it's not really gonna, it's not going to have the same impact because they haven't yet removed the veil of selfishness. And then also there are those who yadribuna fil ard. They're going to go out as seeking the bounty of the world. And he said these are this is a category describing the seekers who are, again, worshipers and ascetics, and they are the people who will attain to the outward of the Quran, meaning they will be able to recite the Quran, they will be able to read it, but it's still on the outward. They will be able to get tafsir, for example. They will be able to try to contemplate the meanings and all of that. But there's an inward to the Quran as well. There's a batin. He says, وَآخَرُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and these are those who are busy fighting their nafs. And so they're so busy fighting their egos that they actually have no free time to contemplate the Quran. There's no emptiness in them yet to contemplate the Quran because they're just busy in the battle. And so to all of these categories, it is said to them, read what is easy, right? Stand in the prayer of your hearts. Block out the worries that you have with the remembrance of Allah. And in every category, they're going to give a zakah. The zakah of the bodies, again, is the spiritual exercises in the mujahada, the struggle against the ego. And then to give Allah a goodly loan means to cut off the love of the world from your hearts. In all of this struggle, for the categories that are described, are rewarded both in this life and the next. So, and yeah, and then he ends the commentary there. Alhamdulillah. And now, inshallah, we're going to go to Surah al Mudathir. Zoom is still up. Did I close the Zoom? Oh, I'm still here. Okay. Just need to get to that.
I'm so confused because it's trying to share something. Let me close what we're sharing.
Oh, okay. So let me do stop share. There we go. And then I'm going to open al Mudathir. Okay. And we're today, inshallah, we're only starting Surah al Mudathir. Now, as an introduction, Surah al Mudathir is among the earliest Meccan surahs. The majority of commentators believe that this surah in its entirety is Meccan, the entire surah, and others said that from verses 31 to 56 is actually from the Madini period. And that's mentioned in the Tafsir of Imam al-Alusi. Now, Surah al Mudathir and Surah al Muzammil are similar in some ways. Both are said to respond to the Prophet Muhammad covering himself when the experience of the revelation began. But in Surah al Muzammil, the instruction to the Prophet Muhammad is about practices that he and the companions should follow. And whereas this surah focuses more on his function as a warner to those who do not yet follow him. So Surah al Muzammil is giving the Prophet Muhammad and the companions their spiritual practice, right? Their worship, their devotion. It's building that foundation. And Surah al Mudathir is giving the Prophet Muhammad his outward mission, right? To come out and be a warner. I mean, just a simple sort of reflection from that is that, like, we can't do outward exertions. We cannot better the world around us until we really work on bettering the world within us, right? And we can't call anybody else to God until we first call ourselves to God regularly, right? Through worship. Now, according to an account from one of the companions, so there's a discussion about, because there was a companion who said this was the very first revelation. Now, the majority of scholars say, no, this is not the first revelation. The first revelation is Surah Al-Alaq, the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Alaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created man. And so this is, but there's a way to negotiate the two accounts or the two statements. So here there's a companion named Yahya ibn Abi Kathir. And he said that the first 5 verses of the first 5 verses of this surah constitute the first revelation. See, I think on Zoom they can still hear me. Okay. Oh wow. Oh no. I thought it was this. I'm like, it came alive. Thank you so much. Okay. So Ibn Abi Kathir, he asked someone named Abu Salama ibn Abdurrahman, what was the first surah of the Qur'an to be revealed? And Abu Salama replied, the first verse was, Ya ayyuhal mudaththir. And so Ibn Abi Kathir then said to him, they say it was Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, right? They say it was recite in the name of thy Lord who created. Upon hearing that, Abu Salama said, I asked Jabir ibn Abdullah about that, saying the same as you have said, whereupon he said, I will not tell you except what the messenger of God has told us. The Messenger of God said, I passed a month at Mount Hira, and when my stay came to an end, I came down. While I was walking, I heard a voice from the sky. I looked up toward the sky, and behold, I saw the same angel who had come to me in the cave of Hira, sitting on a stool between the sky and the earth. I was so terrified by him that I fell down on the ground. Then I went to my wife and said, cover me, cover me. They covered me, and then God revealed, Ya ayyuhal mudathir, in the first 5 verses. And this is mentioned in the Tafsir Imam al-Baghawi and also al-Wahidi. Now, there's an easy way to reconcile the two accounts. Ibn Kathir proposes that the reference to quote unquote the same angel who came to me in the cave of Hira indicates that this narration pertains to the second experience of the revelation, thus making the first 5 verses of this surah the first revelation after Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq, which happened in the cave. And then others, the way that they negotiate it is they said that the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Alaq marks the beginning of revelation in general as a whole. And these verses are the first verses that give the command to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to warn, which means these are the first verses to command him into the role of being a messenger of God, right? Versus just receiving the revelation. The surah is sort of categorized in 4 different, it's broken down into 4 different themes. The first 7 verses are the opening exhortation to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Verses 8 through 10 warn of the Day of Judgment. And then it kind of segues into discussion to those who deny the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, verses 11 through 25. And then there's an allusion to the punishment they're going to encounter in the hereafter, which is 26 through 31. It doesn't actually mention here what happens after 26 through 31. And there's 56 verses. So I guess this is all the description of just what is undebated as the Meccan period of the surah. And then after that is the part that is debated on terms of whether it happened in Mecca or happened in Medina. Okay, I will be quick, inshallah. I won't push it because I know we started so late. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhal mudathir, qum fa'anzir, wa rabbaka fakabbir, wa thiyabaka fatahhir, wa rujza fahjur, wa la tamnun tastakthir. Wa li rabbika fasbir, fa idha nuqira fi an-naqur. فذلك يومئذ يوم عسير على الكافرين غير يسير. O you who are covered. And here, very similar to Ya ayyuhal muzammil was the one who covered himself up, and after he came down from the cave, he told Khadija, cover me, cover me. Now, interestingly, in the tafsir of Imam Ibn Ajibah, he describes a very different account about the surah. And these things have multiple narrations. So one of the ways that this particular surah was narrated is that it wasn't revealed until about 2 years after Iqra Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. 2 years later, still early Meccan period. But he mentioned that the first thing that was revealed was the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Alaq. And then around 2 years passed, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ became so sad because he yearned for revelation. And the revelation had ceased. And he went to the same mountain, hoping that he would find Jibreel. And Jibreel met him there. And he saw Jibreel again after all this time passing. And Jibreel tells him, Innaka Nabiyullah, you are a prophet of God. And that actually shook him, the way that happened to him on the horizon. He didn't even get to the top of the mountain. He sees him, he's going to the mountain. He sees Jibreel on the horizon. He says, Innaka Nabiyullah. And he goes back to Khadija radiallahu anha, and he says, cover me. And then he says, after this is a second incident where he's going to Khadija and asking her to cover him. And then this is revealed. So that's one of the accounts for specifically Surah al Mudathir. And he did enfold himself in a cloak, in a dithar. And it's very similar as Surah al Muzammil, thou who art covered, is taken also. Al Mudathir is one of the 7 ways that the Prophet Muhammad is addressed in the Qur'an. So he's known as Al Muzammil, right? And he's also known as Al Mudathir, the one who's covered. And then arise and warn indicates that this is the first call to the Prophet to deliver the new revelation and to propagate the prophetic message. And from a spiritual perspective, verses 1 and 2 can also be understood as a call to all human beings to remove what separates them from God, to actually arise through God and drop everything other than God. And that's a spiritual actually interpretation in tafsir. And Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions qum is stand with resolution and conviction and warn your people of the akhirah if they reject the truth. Thy Lord magnify, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. Here, magnify your Lord. Imam Ibn Ajiba says, magnify him in your speech and also in your heart, such that no one is greater in your eyes except for Allah. No one is great in your eyes except for Allah. Everyone else is not great, only Allah is great. So magnify him above everything else. And then your garments, also another meaning from that, Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions, is that if the people that you are calling to and you are warning them, if they bother you, if they reject you, if they, because this is what is expected for people who call to the way of God, is they're going to be resisted. If they bother you, then know that God is greater. That's also part of it, is like magnify your Lord, knowing that he is greater than all the obstacles that are in front of you as you are out on the path of warning mankind. And then thy garments purify. Purification here is of both one's physical garments and also the spiritual garment of character and heart before prayer. And that's mentioned in the tafsir of al-Baghawi and Ibn Kathir. In Arabic, to say that one's garments are pure is to imply that it is free from faults and vices. So there's the word garment is an indication of character. Regarding ritual purification, the Prophet Muhammad said, whosoever performs ablution and does so in a beautiful way, right? So they're making wudu, but they really do it in a beautiful way. They're not just rushing and splashing water all over the place. They're doing it with intention, right? His sins shall leave his body and will even leave from under his fingernails. And that's the assignment for this week, is actually when we're making wudu, to try to do it in a beautiful way this week, to actually imagine these sins just flowing away from us and rejoicing in that at some level. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, when a person washes his face, the sins of his eyes will be washed away. And when he washes his hands, the sins of what his hands have done will be washed away. And when he washes his feet, the sins of where he walked will be washed away. And with the last drop of water, he will be free of sin. So that's let's intend those things. Gosh, you want to just, before you even get to salah, you want to have all those sins washed away, inshallah. So that's the intention, inshallah, is to beautify our wudu. And then another aspect of purifying the garments is to shorten the garments rather than wearing them in the ostentatious manner of the time of Jahiliyyah. The pre-Islamic Arabs used to wear really long robes to show how cool, how it was a thing of arrogance, and look at me with my flowing robe behind me, And so it's actually considered the first of the blameworthy adat that the Prophet Muhammad sort of corrected amongst his people, was this particular act. And it wasn't just that there's two aspects to wearing that kind of a garment. On one hand, it's worn for arrogance. It's look at me and I'm so important. But the other aspect of it is by having such a long flowy garment, it's dragging through the sand and the dirt and all sorts of filth are going to be on that garment. How are you going to pray in something like that? And so so it's both a spiritually, it's not a good garment, or it's a dirty garment because there's arrogance associated with it. And then physically, it's actually a dirty garment. So purifying that garment in that way. And then there's an interesting discussion that Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions about how scholars understood this verse. Was it just the physical? How many of the scholars thought it was physical? Just the garment itself needs to be clean and pure and short and all of that? And so he says these were the opinions of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, that it's talking about the physical garment. And then he said other scholars, especially other mufassirin, said it's both the physical and the spiritual, because clothing and garment represents character. And also that when this verse was revealed, when the verse وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, when the idea of magnifying your Lord, and the word kabbir is like a command, right? And it's translated as magnify, but takbir, right? If you say kabbir, it's like commanding someone to say Allahu Akbar, right? So so when this verse was revealed, it said that Khadija radiallahu anha said Allahu Akbar, and she became so pleased after she said it. And the reason being is that once she said it, she knew, this is narrated about her, that she knew that what was coming to the Prophet Muhammad was divine revelation. So you know, they say that one of the ways that we know God is not just by learning about him in a passive sense, but also remembering him, but also saying his name, right? So we don't just know him by thinking to ourselves, he's the most great, but you will actually get to know him when you say Allahu Akbar, when you say La ilaha, that the act of saying, there's a connection of in the speech itself for you to know. I remember I asked one of my teachers, like, I know that we can make dhikr in our hearts, right, without moving our lips. And he said, you should still move your lips. And I'm like, that means there's an added secret, there's an added benefit, there's an added like door to my heart when I actually say it. So it's just interesting that Khadija radiallahu anha, when this verse was revealed, it's reported she said Allahu Akbar, and then she became so pleased, and she knew that it was divine revelation. I said قم فأنذر with you. وَرُجْزَ فَهْجُرْ, and defilement, shun. Here, defilement translates as rujz. It can also be understood to mean idols or misdeeds. So it's either the false idols, it's also any kind of defilement of deeds that make you far from God. One must shun all that would lead to what's displeasing to God, or what would lead to punishment. I think, let's see, I don't want to take it, maybe I'll end at 7. I have until 10, but I'll maybe just for time. وَلَا تَمْنُن تَسْتَكْثِرْ, grant not favor seeking gain. I thought this was actually, subhanAllah, like doing the tafsir this time and looking at the order of revelation and looking at how this is one of the first commands to the Prophet Muhammad as he is going out as a messenger of God. And then this particular command I thought was so significant, because I'm like, this is a core central character quality of a Muslim, right? It's what the Prophet is being commanded to as a prophet, but for all of us, like this is something where I think we're missing it. And he says that it's when you give, essentially, in Imam Ibn Ajiba talks about this in his tafsir. Essentially, he's saying your giving cannot be transactional. You are not giving to get anything back. You're not giving in whether it's a financial donation or whatever, it's literally to be of benefit. It's help without the expectation of any kind of return in this world, right? I'm just doing this because this is what's good for me to do. This is something God wants me to do. So to give without an expectation of a return, a charity should be given freely for the sake of God, not to curry favor or to seek material gain. And it's also, Imam Suyuti mentions this, Imam al-Baghawi mentions this, that it can also be seen as a general command for all believers to give in that way. That when you give, do not give expecting any kind of return or to curry favor, some kind of material gain. And it can also, at the same time, it can also be seen as a particular command for the Prophet Muhammad in his role as a messenger of God. But what it made me think about is like modern fundraising. Like you have to sell your cause so hard, and you have to be like, if you give at this level, then we're going to give you a little bookmark, and if you give at this level, we're going to give you a little plaque, and if you do this one, then we'll give you like shoes. You know, like there has to be some, you know, like people have to feel like if I'm going to give a donation to even a cause they believe in, like what am I personally getting in return, right? And this idea of like when you're giving something for the sake of God, You're giving it for the sake of God. Like if you believe in it, you believe this is a good cause, this is a charity worthy of, then just, you don't ask for the, what am I going to get out of it afterwards? Does that mean that I get to be invited to VIP dinners and, you know, like have special, I don't know, treatment from the organization because of how much I gave and things like that. So, and I know that is modern fundraising. Like if you take any, I haven't done it, but they send you, they send me emails for, like for the Majlis we have Kindful. So Kindful always sends us like these, just as part of like being registered with Kindful, they send you all these emails of modern fundraising techniques and things like that. And so I'm looking through it and I'm like, all of it is like, you're not getting a donation, you're selling, there's a transaction. This is what you gave, this is what you're going to get back. And the prophets, when they give, they are supposed to give in a way where you're not expecting any kind of worldly return, right? And then I also thought about it, subhanAllah, when I was younger, in terms of the culture of volunteerism when I was younger. I feel like definitely we have a lot, that wasn't all right, but volunteers were heavily abused. we were abused volunteers as children, like they really took advantage of free labor. But at the same time, I remember that we never, like when I was in middle school or high school and we were doing this in the masjid for different reasons, or it was like you volunteer because you're part of the community. It's what everyone does. Whoever has some time to give, they give it. And the like entire events would be not even events like huge things, like the Eid carnival in our local community, which was a very big carnival. Like non-Muslims would come out and be part of our carnival because it was like it looked like a fair or something, you know, it had really big rides and stuff. And so like our youth group would just be there all day. We would just be like, okay, that's what we're doing on that day, you know. And there was never like I mean, I'm not against these things, by the way. I believe we should treat our volunteers well, and I hope inshallah you guys don't leave me after I say all this. But there was no like volunteer appreciation, anything. It was just like you just go and you do what you're supposed to do, and you're standing at the cotton candy machine with its heat blowing in your face all day, or the popcorn machine or whatever it is. But it was just like that's what you do because you're part of community, you know. It wasn't, I don't want to say it was an expectation per se, but it was like, it was a norm that was not, I don't think any of us felt like we were doing anything extra. No one felt like we're doing something other people are not doing. We were just doing what everyone was doing. And now I think volunteerism has taken such a different, with the competitiveness of getting into colleges and like getting in your hours and proving that you're a leader in your community and stuff. There's like the society that we're in is somewhat training young people to be transactional in their understanding of service. Like you need to get in this many hours so then you can be part of the National Honor Society or I don't even know what CSF, California Scholastic Federation. I still know these words, alhamdulillah. But that's like, you know, I still remember, I'll say it. I had a friend who, she was like, I have no leadership experience on my resume. And so I was like, what are you going to do? She's like, I'm gonna run for MSA president. I was like, so I was like, that's not like, you don't run for FSA president so you can put it on your resume, you know, or your like college application. And then she's like, oh, no, I'm going to resign after 2 weeks. So, but she did it. She actually ran and she won. Landslide, won. And then 2 weeks later, she resigned. And then we had another. Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying is like, you're coming from this culture that's almost like everything has to be a career move. Everything has to be transactional. Everything has to be, you get it back. And so when I'm reading this one, it says, grant not any favor seeking gain. It's like, where did altruism go? Where you just do the good because it's good. It has its own value. And I think I took up all the time with all of those tangents. So the class is just not just tafsir, but some of my random ruminating as well. I think maybe for today, inshallah, we'll close with that and we'll just end on number 6. If anyone has any questions or we can take maybe 1 or 2.
Not necessarily
Yes, yes, that is the intention, right? Is Allah's pleasure, Allah's reward. Yeah. So that's the why we do it.
But we should just want to do things for Allah's sake and not expect something from Allah's side.
Yeah, so like, for example, there's people do this where they're like, I'm going to give to this charity. And then while I'm giving it, it's like, oh, Allah, please accept this and let my son get into Stanford. Do you know what I mean? And so there's like, and that's not actually technically haram. It's you, that's like you're giving an amount with as part of your dua itself. But that's a different kind than just like I'm giving because Allah loves this and is pleased with this. It's the one about like associating a dua with it is not haram. In the past, like when people would do things like that, they'd slaughter animals and feed a bunch of poor people and ask and associate that with a particular prayer. Let's say somebody was really ill in the family and they'd ask for shifa, through the feeding of the hungry and stuff. And those things are allowed. But
I would recommend, I guess, teaching kids. It's funny when you mentioned that volunteer thing. I noticed that is something that I see a lot with middle school and high school kids who I'll volunteer for them to get credit for it because we get credit at school for some stuff. It was strange to me because we didn't have this growing up. But I mean, what is a good way to be able to kind of bring back this idea of just doing it for Allah? Are there like specific ideas or activities?
I don't know. I think that for younger people, they have to do it with their families. When they do it with other kids, or when they see their parents doing it, or they're part of a community where that, like I said, like for us, we didn't actually think we're doing anything good. Like we didn't think like, oh, we're volunteering. It was more like everyone's here. There's like our moms are making the food and our dads are doing this and they're making the signs. It's like all hands on deck type thing. And so people just being part of the community are part of that experience. So hopefully maybe just being in both family experiences and community experiences where they're getting to do that together or seeing that example even in front of them,
That's good, but I think the major difference between them is social media, like iPhones and everything at the time. So like I wonder how much that contributed to like, doing a program or platform.
Yeah, social media, man. Like it's like, look at all the food we made. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But I like the kids that I'm seeing are in like I don't know if it's private or public schools, but they're not Muslim schools, and these schools are telling them you can get credit if you go do this activity. So then they come to the semester and they're like, "Will you have my phone?" Like, come do this thing, and so it's interesting to me because it's like the two worlds, like the culture, and teach them.
Well, I mean, when I was in school, we actually had to do volunteer hours, and I remember like signing up to volunteer I went to public school, but I volunteered at the Islamic school. And even though I had to do it for hours, one thing that I remember very distinctly is the principal of that school, God bless her and increase her and raise her rank, is an elderly lady. And she, when I volunteer with her, we'd literally be sitting in like this dungeon-like office inside the masjid that like nobody's in it, all the lights are off, the whole place is empty, and we're just in this, we're not in the musalla, it's like beautiful at that time. We're in this dungeon office in the corner downstairs, no windows, and we're just Xeroxing like Arabic and Islamic studies like textbooks for the different grades and classes for hours. Like it's just Xerox and Xerox and Xerox. And I remember thinking to myself, like, subhanAllah, like I'm doing this because I have volunteer hours. When I do this, I take it back to school and whatever. But the principal who's doing this, like she's a principal, you know what I mean? And she could have secretaries do this for her. She could, you know what I mean? She could ask for hired staff. But like, I remember just really admiring the nobility of like such unseen service. Like nobody's here. I'm here, we're just like, Xeroxing this out of the Xerox machine. But like she's doing this. When I leave, she's still doing this. I don't know until what time at night she's doing it until. So in some ways, I still think there's good. Like even mandating some level of volunteering, there's like as a young person, I was exposed, alhamdulillah, in that way. And that like stayed with me. That's a memory that, alhamdulillah. Hopefully those kids also get that, inshallah.
Said that things happen not because of like our actions or things that happen because of messages. Is that
In as it relates to spiritual openings.
so like into spiritual openings, like things that can happen, you know?
I mean, like a person can be doing all these good deeds their whole life, right? But their rank with God, right, is not increased just because of their good deeds. It's because God pulls them and takes them from one station to another.
So it's not so about like spirituality versus what actually happens.
Even as it relates to like there's definitely a level of aqidah that's tied into this. So there's different realities, like we have choice, right? And we have deeds and we're rewarded for our deeds and we're punished for our misdeeds, right? Or we're held accountable. However, our ability to do a good deed is not independent of God. Like the only way we were able to do it is also through God's divine decree. And so one of the ways that I've heard like Dr. Amr describes this is like we acquire our deeds. Acquiring is like there's a level of exertion and intention, and then there's a level of like God placing it in your, bestowing that upon you. And the way I've heard Dr. Amr describe it is like your irada and God's decree, like they meet at the same point. Your like exertion or your what willpower is like like your exertion is maybe a better term, because sometimes you can want something and it doesn't happen, right? So it's like so again, like that's why we say that whatever good we're able to do is from God. It could not have happened without God's like tawfiq, is the success coming to us from him. And so that's also another reason to be really, really grateful for the good that we're able to do, is like God bestowed this on me, right? Like you do the deed and then you're grateful that God let you do it. Then you're grateful that he let you be grateful.
I was gonna ask because I know, for example, I've seen the videos on stuff, things that you should say or do, or times in the day when you should make it to be able to do your job.
Mhm.
I know this question took a long answer, but I was just kind of like wondering how does that tap into it?
So there's adab, but at the same time, is God all powerful and he can answer your dua, whether it's raining or not raining, whether you're in sujood or not sujood, whether you're, so it's kind of like, there's moments that are very special moments that they will motivate us, right? And whenever we feel like there's an opening in that space, it's going to bring out it's going to take us out of a certain level of negligence so that we take advantage of these opportunities. But it's not going to be because we said the dua in this or that particular way that the dua is answered, right? In the sense that, and I remember hearing this from Ustaz Fuad himself about dua, about like, he was praying for something and he was like, if I pray it like this, and if I pray it like that, and then he was like, wait, we're talking about God, like this isn't, he's the all powerful, he can give it to me. I have to trust that I've asked him, khalas, like, it's with him. And I've heard even teachers say that once a person has asked God of something and they've done so with like, I want to say the spiritual etiquettes of like with humility and with all these things, right? Repetition of something may not necessarily be even good adab. Or the person can repeat because it satisfies their own heart, right? Like it makes me feel better because I keep asking, or it's a sign, or if the intention is I'm going to continue to ask to just show God that I'm still standing at his door, I'm still hopeful, right? Like they do it as an act of worship. Because dua is an act of worship. So it's like the extension of the act of worship, right? So depending on the intention, but like, I remember, there's a lot about like, when you supplicate, don't supplicate like like you're despairing in God, like you believe he's not going to give it to you. Like you're begging him because you don't think he'll ever give you something good. That's not how we ask him. A person can beg, but begging from like a place of, yeah, Allah, I'm coming to you as your impoverished servant who has nothing. And, out of like a humility type begging versus a despair type begging, right? But I want to say, even with that, if a person is feeling whatever they're feeling, dua is like, it's, I want to say it correctly. I think it's this, it's not the sword. It's the weapon of the believer. There's a word for this, and I don't want to say it wrong, but I want to say it's better than not doing it. So like the person who's feeling despair, but they still make dua, that's still a sign of their hope in God, So I would still say go and make dua. And we also believe that the only time we're not given what we're asking for from Allah is when we're given something that is better than what we're asking for. Shaykh Walid also talked a little bit about this in the retreat in terms of people are in different phases in their life. And sometimes a person is just in a place where they know that God already knows their needs, right? They really are, let's say they really feel that. So rather than to like ask the specifics of, I want this and this and this and this, because they know that God knows this so much better than even I know it, then they'll make very general du'as. Oh, Allah, give me that which is good. Right? Make me content with that which is good and stuff, because their state is already very connected to that. And so I don't want to make this a long answer. I want to say if you're inspired to make a dua, make it. Because one of the signs that like Allah wants to give it to you or give you something is the fact that you're inspired to make the supplication in the first place. So I want to say like, don't force anything and let it be natural. And what comes, what comes to you or comes to each one of us, like there's a reason why there's a need to say something, right? And so we just take it to God and there's no regret for that, inshallah. I don't know if that even, okay. Sometimes I just keep going. So I think inshallah we'll end. Thank you guys for staying for the whole like an hour after class today. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tarda wa ja'alna min abidika su'ada wa amitna ala kalimatul huda. Allimna ma yanfa'una wa wafiqna lil amali bima 'allamtana bih. واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Thank you. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.